Hey, Chevra, what's happening? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Nun Ches, Daf 58 of Masechta Ayruvin. Today's main thing, so we're basically going to learn a new Mishnah and go to the next Mishnah. And it primarily deals with measuring the tehum. Like, how do we actually measure the tehum? We kind of referenced the other day that there would be these people who would kind of like measure the distance outside of the city and leave markers and stuff like that. So how would they actually measure the tehum? What if there are mountains and valleys and things like that? So how do you take that into account? So that's what we're going to talk about, Chevra. We're going to start on Daf Nun Zayin Amud Beis, 4 lines from the bottom at the Mishnah. In modedin ela bechevel shel nun ama leipachis v'leyoser. So the way that they would measure the tehum is that they would take a rope that was 50 amas long, and you would take 2 people, and one person, we're going to see soon that you would hold it by your heart, and one person would hold it at Ayruvin would hold it at his heart, Shimon would hold it at his heart. They would stand 50 amas away from each other on either end of the rope, and they would calculate 50 amas, and then they would use this 50 amma rope until they got to 2,000 amas. Exactly. And when they're measuring, they are holding the rope by their heart. Now what happens if they're measuring and now they get to a valley, a dip? Or some kind of a fence. Mavlio. So what you do there is you basically swallow it. What does it mean to swallow it? Well, if this valley is less than 50 amas, well, you can just have Reuven stand on one side of the valley. Shimon just goes to the other side of the valley. They measure how wide the valley is, and they keep on going. What do you do if it's wider than that? We'll have to figure it out. Fine. V'chozer limidaso, and then he goes back to his measuring, and the Gemara is going to explain what does it mean that he goes back to his measuring. Also, if he gets to a mountain, same thing. If it's, I guess, not such a very tall mountain where they can just kind of hold the rope over their heads and get over this, probably more of a hill, pretty small hill. If they are able to just make a straight line with their rope above this incline, we'll do that. As long as you don't go outside of the tehum, and we're going to have to explain exactly what this going back to where you were measuring is talking about and not going out of the tehum. So we're going to see what that means. Fine, let's go weiter. Now, if he's unable to just use the rope to cover this area, so let's say you have a mountain, and you're not able to, the mountain is like an actual mountain, or like a hill or something, and you can't just hold the rope over your head and get over it. So what you do is, Bazo Amar Abdostai Bar Yanai. So in this case, Abdostai Bar Yanai said, Mishum Rab Meir, in the name of Rab Meir, Shamaiti Shemakajin Baharim, that Rab Meir said, and we had this on Daf, I think, Lamed Heom and Beis, that Rab Meir said that he heard, Lamed Heom and Beis, that he heard that you'd be allowed to make a hole through a mountain. Now, you don't actually bore a hole through the mountain. What you would do is, the Gemara is going to explain how it is, but basically they had this method of approximating what a straight line through a mountain, what that distance would be. So if you can, so then just hold it over your head and cover the mountain. But if it's too big and you can't do that, so then you just kind of basically make a straight line through the mountain, and there's a way that they would do that. Okay, let's go weiter. Minani Mili, how do we know that you use this 50 amma rope when measuring the tehum? So Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, to Amar Kra, that the pasuk says, Orech hachatzer mea ba'ama, that the length of the courtyard of the Mishkan was 100 amas, Virochav chamishim b'chamishim, and its width was 50 amas by 50 amas. Amar Torah, the Torah said, B'chevel shel chamishim amma midod, measure with a rope that is 50 amas long. Okay? Haimi ba'ilei, lito chamishim l'saviv chamishim, but 1 second. That is the same exact pasuk that we used to learn out that a karpaf is 70 2/3 amas. So we got to make up our mind. Do we learn out from chamishim b'chamishim that a karpaf is 70 and 2/3 amas, or do we learn from chamishim b'chamishim that you use a rope that's 50 amas long in order to measure Tchum Shabbos? Which one is it? So the Gemara answers it's both. How come it's both? Because im kain, if it was so that we had to choose between one or the other, well, lemakra chamishim chamishim, my chamishim ba chamishim shmazmina tarte. If it only would have said chamishim chamishim, then we would only be able to learn out one thing, either the 50 amma rope or the 70 and 2/3 amma karpaf. However, since it says chamishim ba chamishim, the extra bays, we can learn out that we can learn two things from there. Both that a rope needs to be 50 amas, and also that a karpaf is 70 and 2/3 amas. As we learned, I think that was in what? The second parak. We were talking about karpafs and 70 and 2/3 amas. Beis Asayim. Sure, it brings back good memories. Let's move on. Leipachis v'leyoser. So the rope can be no longer than 50 amas, and no less than 50 amas. How come? So Tana lo pachis mipnei shemarbe. It can't be less than 50 amas, because if the rope is less than 50 amas, you're going to pull it tighter, and you're going to end up, essentially claiming that you're measuring only 50 amas, but you're really measuring more than 50 amas. So in order to keep, to prevent you from pulling it too tight and measuring more than essentially you're claiming that you're measuring, right? Because every time you extend the rope, you're assuming that it's 50 amas. But if it's less than 50, so let's say it's 25 amas, so every time you extend the rope, you're going to claim that it's 25 amas, but you're actually going to pull it too tight, and it's going to be 30 amas, but you're going to claim it's 25, it's going to be inaccurate. V'lo yoser, now also you shouldn't use a rope that's longer than 50 amas, mipnei shemamait, because you're going to end up making the tchum too short, because if it's too long, it's going to dip in the middle, and you're not really going to get the full tautness. Amr ba'asi, ein modin el bechevel shel afsikima. So Rabasi says that the rope that you made is made out of afsikima. My afsikima, Amr bi'aba nargila. What is afsikima? Rabbi Abi says it's nargila. My nargila, what's nargila? Amr bi'Yakov dikla dechad navara. Yaakov says it's some kind of stuff that grows around palm trees. Alright. Ikeda Amr, those who say, I think it's essentially the same thing, but just mamish, instead of Amr Rabbi Abba, it's Rabbi Abba Amr. So Ikeda Amr, those who say, my afsikima, what's afsikima? Rabbi Abba Amr says Rabbi Abba Nargila. Rabbi Yaakov Amr says Rabbi Yaakov Dikla Dechad Navara, that it is this stuff that grows around the palm trees. Tanya, we learn in a brayso. Amr Rabbi Yoshua ben Chananya, says Rabbi Yoshua, Ein lecha sheyafa l'medida yosef mishal shelo shel barzel. There's nothing greater for measuring than iron chains. Okay, I guess you take these heavy iron chains, you lay them out on the floor in a straight line. You don't have to worry about anything moving. It's the best thing for measuring. Aval, manase, but what can we do? Shari Amr Torah, the Torah says not necessarily the Torah, but the Navi, it says in Zechariah, uviyadu chevel mida. Right, it says in the Nevuah about the Beis HaMikdash that it was I guess somebody standing there, and in his hand was a measuring rope. So we see that we use rope for measuring. V'aksib, we have a pasuk that says Uvyada ish knei amida. We have a pasuk in Yechezkel when describing the third Beis HaMikdash. So it says that there was a person standing there with a stick for measuring. So is it a rope? Is it a stick? What about iron chains? So ahu l'sarae. So the stick is for the gates. The gates, they use a stick, but for I guess the courtyards and stuff, they use a rope. Very nice. Tani Rav Yosef taught shlosha chavalim heim. There are three types of rope that we use. Shal magog, a rope made out of magog reeds. Shal netzer, a rope made out of peeled willows. Oh, it's sukkahs. So willows, aravis. V'shal pishtan, and linen ropes. Shal magog lifar, they use the ropes of magog of reeds for a paraduma, for a red heifer, that after they slaughter the red heifer, ditnan kaftua bechevel amagog, that they would then tie up, I think after it was shechted, they would tie up the paraduma with a rope of reeds, and v'nesanu al gav ma'arachta, and they would put the paraduma on the mizbeach to burn, okay, or wherever they were burning it. Shanitzarim, a rope made out of peeled willows. The sota, that is for a sota, for a woman who is suspected of her husband of adultery, right? I always think it's adultery, and it becomes a whole thing, and they go to the Beis Hamikdash, and part of what happens there is they tear her clothing, and then in order to make sure that her clothing doesn't fall off of her, they then tie her clothing, right? So the Tanan, as it says in a Mishnah, Achakach Mevia Chevel HaMitzri, that after they tear her clothing, they bring a Chevel HaMitzri, which is a rope made out of these peeled willows, and they tie this rope above her breast so that the clothing doesn't fall off. Shalpishtan limedida, and we use a rope made out of linen for measuring. So I guess we would use this rope for the Tehum Shabbos. We'd use a linen rope. Okay. Haya moded vehigia. So here we go. Exactly. So we had said in the Mishnah that if he was measuring and he got to like a valley, so he said mavlio v'chozer lemidaso, that he kind of uses the rope to cover the valley, to cover the length of the valley, and then he goes back to where he's measuring. So what does that mean? So here we go. So miditani chozer lemidaso, from the fact that it says that you measure the valley and then go back to where you were measuring, so what are you going back to? Michladim enu yachol lavlio. So that implies that what happens is that if you're, let's say, so you have your city, and let's say you're measuring the Tehum north of the city, and you go north of the city, and then you get to some valley. Now, the valley, however, is more than 50 amas, has a width of more than 50 amas, so you can't actually swallow it with your 50 amma rope. However, you look to the left, and you see, the valley actually gets narrower to where it is within 50 amas. So what you do is, so he walks over to the place where it's within 50 amas, and then you measure the valley from that place where it's 50 less than 50 amas or less, and you can measure its width. So then he looks back to where he was measuring originally, and he goes back to there. So basically, so let's say he's measuring the northern Tehum of the city. He leaves the city, let's say 200 amas, right? And then he gets to this valley. Now it's more than 50 amas wide, but he sees to the left, he can walk a little bit, and then it becomes within 50. So he goes over there to within 50. Now he measures those 50 amas, then he goes back to the straight line, where he was before, and continues measuring. So he had measured 200 originally, now he measures 50 of the width of the valley, and then I guess continues from 250 going forward. Says the Gemara, Tanina la de Tanu Rabbanan. We actually have a Tosefta which supports that which we just said. Hayamoded v'yigia hamida legai. If he was measuring and they got to a valley, im yachol avlio bechevel shel chamishim ama. If he can, basically cover the valley with a rope that is 50 amas, well then mavlio, great, do that. Just extend the rope over the valley. Figure out how wide it is and keep on going. V'im lav, but if the valley is too wide, so then holech lemakom sheyachol avlio, so then he goes to a place where it will be less than 50 amas and he can measure it, umavlio, and then he extends the rope over the valley at that point where it's 50 amas, and he measures the valley that way. V'im lav. Wait, I don't know what I just said. One second. Whoa, what did I just read? So, im yachol avlio bechevel chamishim ama mavlio. So, if the valley is 50 amas or less, and basically he can use his rope, so then do that. V'im lav, if the valley is more than 50 amas wide, well then holich l'makom sheyachol avlio, go walk over to a place where it's 50 amas or less, and you'd be able to use that rope and extend it over the valley and measure it that way. Umavlio, and he measures it v'tzofe. And he goes back to his original place where he was measuring from. Now, imhaya guy meukam makdir ve'ole makdir ve'yored. So now, however, what happens if he's measuring and basically this valley, there isn't a place nearby where he can cross where the valley is 50 amos or less. Now, if the valley, however, continues like around the city, and if you kind of would go around the city to like a different side of the city, that is where it gets narrower. So we say in that case, you don't go around the city to where it gets narrower. Instead, what you do is you do this thing that we mentioned earlier about there was some way that they could calculate, and we're going to get to it later, how exactly they would calculate essentially what a straight line, how they could basically measure the valley in such a way that in the end they would get a number that would be the equivalent of a straight line. Higia lekotel, if they get to a wall, ein omrim yikov hakotel, we don't say draw a straight line through the wall, ela omdo v'holech lo, rather what you do is you just estimate what it is. One second, we said in our Mishnah that what you do when you get to a wall is that you would basically see if you could get the rope to go over it, and then you'll see what that measurement is, basically cover it with the rope. And if it's like too steep or whatever, then you'll kind of draw a line through it. Over here, we're just saying estimate it. So hasam nicha tashmishta. Well, over there, that's talking about where you're able to kind of like walk on it, and you'd be able to kind of measure it. Whereas over here, it's not, it's too steep, and you wouldn't actually be able to, it's like a 90-degree wall, so you wouldn't be able to actually walk on it. So here, you just kind of evaluate it. Okay. Hachalo nicha tashmishta. Here it's not convenient to walk on it. Amar Rab Yehuda Amar Shmuel says, reviewed in the name of Shmuel, Loshanu ela she'ein chuta mashkoles yored kenegdo. Interesting. When we're talking about like kind of this whole thing about making like a hole through a mountain, or like walking down into a valley, right? So when you would walk down into a valley and then you would do this kind of measurement to figure out what the equivalent of a straight line would be, that is only when a chuta mashkoles is not yored kenegdo. What's a chuta mashkoles? A chuta mashkoles is a rope that has a weight at the end of it. And basically, if you were like digging out into the ground and you wanted to know if the wall that you're building is a straight line, what you would do is they would take a rope and they would put some kind of a weight at the end of the rope, and they would hang it down, and the rope would be a straight line. And if the rope hits the wall, then that means it's not a straight wall. If the rope remains parallel, then that means that it is a straight wall. So what Rav Yehuda is saying in the name of Shmuel is that this idea of like when you have this valley and then you would try to you would go down and measure the valley in such a way that you would try to calculate what the equivalent, what it would be if it was a straight line, that is only when this rope, that basically when it's on an angle, when it's not parallel, right? Whenever this, what does it say? Chuta mashkoles yored kenegdo. If this rope would not go down parallel to it, aval chuta mashkoles yored kenegdo. But if it would be parallel, well, in that case, you don't need any fancy calculations. In that case, moddo medida yafe. In that case, just go to the bottom of this valley and just calculate how long it is, right? Meaning if it's a 90-degree angle, so basically you get up to this valley, then there's a 90-degree angle, so go down to the bottom of it, keep on measuring, and then go back up again if it's steep hills, if it's steep sides. It's only when the sides are not steep, and they're on an angle, so in that case you have to kind of figure out what the equivalent would be in terms of if it were a straight line. V'chama omko shel gai. So what is the depth of a valley? What is the maximum depth of a valley that we say that you'd be able to just extend the rope over it? Is there a maximum depth? We said that there's a maximum width, which is 50 amos, right? Because we have a rope that's 50 amos. So in order for us to extend the rope over the valley, it can only be up to 50 amos. But what about in terms of its depth? Is there a maximum depth? Amr Rav Yosef Alpayim. Rav Yosef says that the maximum depth is 2,000 amos. Eis ve'Abaye. Abaye asks a kasha on Rav Yosef. Omo kuf v'rochav gimel mavlio v'mlav ein mavlio. We have a brisa that says that if the valley is 100 amos deep and 50 amos wide, well then you could extend the rope over it and calculate the valley that way. V'mlav, but if it's deeper than 100 amos, ein mavlio, you can no longer just extend the rope over it and calculate its width that way. So the Gemara answers, well, Huda Amar Ka'acherim. Rav Yosef, who says that the valley can be 2,000 amos deep, he says like acherim. Titania acherim omer mafilu amok alpaim v'rochav gimel nun mavlio. That acherim say that even if the valley was 2,000 amas deep at a width of 50, well, you'd be able to just extend the rope, and that would be acceptable. So Rav Yosef says like acherim. Ika da'amre. However, there are those who say Amar Rav Yosef afilu yaser me'alpaim. It can even be more than 2,000 amas deep. Well, come on. In that case, then who's he saying like? Tlo katanakama v'lo ka'acherim. Is it possible that he's like neither like the Tanakama nor like acherim? Because Tanakama says you have a maximum with depth of 100 amas. Acherim says you have a maximum depth of 2,000 amas. Rav Yosef apparently is saying more than 2,000 amas. So the Gemara answers, Hasam she'ein chut hamashkoles yorid kenegdo. The machlokas between the Tanakama and acherim about if is the maximum depth 100 amas or 2,000 amas is when the valley is not 90 degrees, right? When the chut hamashkoles is not yorid kenegdo, when it's not when it won't go down parallel, when it's not an angle. So in that case, there's the machlokas between the Tanakama and acherim. Tanakama says, look, once already the valley is not 90 degrees and it's on an angle, so after already 100 amas deep, you should really go and get down there and calculate the length of it, using this calculation that we're going to get to soon to show how exactly, to figure out what it would be if it were to be a straight line. And Acherim says you have up until 2,000. However, but where Rav Yosef says that the depth can be even more than 2,000 amas is bechut hamashkoles yorid kenegdo, is when the walls are 90-degree walls. They're super steep. And in that case, you can literally just take a rope, cover the valley, and whatever the length of the rope is going to be what the bottom of the valley is as well. So when we say that the rope is not parallel, how far away is that, right? Meaning, if you take this rope with the weight and put it mamish like right next to the wall and it hits the wall, is that considered not straight? Or, maybe you can extend it out a little bit. So we say that Amar Avimi says Avimi Dalid 4 amas. V'chein Rami Bar Yechezkel Dalid. V'chein Tanu Rami Bar Yechezkel Dalid. Rami Bar Yechezkel also taught 4. So when you're calculating and trying to figure out is this wall of the valley considered straight or not, you would extend the rope first outside, I guess like Wile E. Coyote style. It's kind of like out in the middle of the abyss, 4 amas, and then drop it and see if it clears the wall. So then it's considered a straight wall. If it hits against the wall, then it's considered, the wall is not considered straight. So if he gets to a mountain, so then he covers the mountain with the rope, and then he goes back to his measuring. Amar Rava says, Rava Loshanu Ela Bahar Mislakid Yud Mitoch Dalid. So Rava says that when we talk about measuring the mountain and then kind of piercing a hole through it if you need to. So that is talking about a mountain that gets to a height of 10 tfachim over the course of 4 amos. But if it's kind of like a very not steep mountain that it gets to a height of 10 tfachim over a course of 5 amos, like it takes a while to get some height, so well then you just measure it normally. Rav Huna Brei the Rav Nasin Masni Lekula. Rav Huna Brei the Rav Nasin teaches it a little bit more mekil. Amar Rava, and he says that Rava says Lo Shanu Ela Bahar Mislakid Asar Mito Chamish, that we only kind of will do like the piercing of the mountain thing if it is a mountain that gets to a height of 10 tfachim over the course of 5 amas. But if it is steeper than that, if it gets to a height of 10 tfachim over the course of 4 amos, then you would just estimate it. You would evaluate it. Okay. So as long as he doesn't go outside of the tchum. What does this mean as long as he doesn't go outside of the tchum? So we had said earlier that if he's measuring the tehum and he gets to this valley, and the valley is wider than 50 amas, so he's got to kind of go off, but he sees that there's an area that it's less than 50 amas, so he can go over there and measure there. However, make sure that if you're going to that narrower part in order to measure the area that's less than 50 amas wide, make sure that that place is still within the tehum Shabbos. Now they're measuring this tehum not on Shabbos, right? So they could walk there even though it's not since it's not Shabbos. However, we're still saying, do not, when you're measuring the tehum, don't go outside of where the tehum Shabbos would be in order to measure this part of the valley that is less than 50 amas wide. How come? The question is, how come? So, my timer. So Amar of Kahana, Gzeira Shema Yomru Midas Tchumin Ba'alechan. Because people who are observing the people measuring the tehum, they might think, oh, that's interesting. They're measuring from over there. So they might think that that's also included in the tehum. So people don't get the wrong idea. Even though they're measuring during the week, they're on a weekday, still do not measure. Still keep it within. Don't be measuring anything that would be outside of the tehum Shabbos. So the Gemara says, right? So we had said that if you are unable to hold the rope over this mountain, it's too tall, whatever. So you're gonna have to. So what you want to do is you want to figure out what a straight line through the mountain would be like. So we said right that we imagine as if you kind of drill a hole through the mountain. So how exactly do you do this? So it's kind of interesting. Taner Rabbanan, the rabbis taught Kate said Mekadrin. So how do you basically make this straight line through the mountain? So Tachton keneged libo, elyon keneged margelosav. So basically what we want to do is we want to get a smaller number than, we can't actually drill through the mountain, is the assumption. Now, we can measure up and down the mountain, but that would be too much. We want to get a straight line. That's like the opposite of a straight line. So what you do is that normally they would measure chest to chest. But, right, as we said, right, everyone holds it by their heart. But what we'll do this time is actually the guy in the bottom, he's going to hold the rope at his heart, but the guy higher up on the mountain, he's going to hold it at his feet. And that way they'll be able to cover more ground than if they were both holding it at their heart. And therefore, by doing this, in the end, since you'll be able to cover more ground, you will get essentially a smaller number than if you would have measured it with both of them holding it at their heart. And that smaller number is what a straight line would be. So Tachton keneged libo, so the guy lower down holds it by his heart. Elyon keneged margelosav, the guy higher up has it by his feet. Amar Abai says, Abai nikitinan, that we have a Masorah that ein mekadrin el bechevel shel arba amas, that when we do this exercise to do this straight line from a mountain thing, so we would do it with a rope that is 4 amas, not a rope that is 50 amas. Amar of Nachman Amar Rabba bar Avua in mekadrin lo be'egla arufa v'lo ba'ari miklat mipnei shein shel Torah. Interesting. So when it comes to a egla arufa, what's an egla arufa? An egla arufa is when you find a corpse in the middle of a field and you don't know who the corpse is, you don't know who killed him, you don't know anything about it. So what you do is you measure what's the closest city, and then the elders of that city, they take this calf and they kill it in a barren area. And so we got to figure out which city is closest. So when you're measuring which city is closest, so we don't do this straight line thing. Over there, if there's a mountain, we measure the mountain. So because it's the oraisa, we say the same thing by an ir miklat, that just like the ir miklat, right? These cities of refuge. If somebody kills somebody else by accident, so they can run to these cities of refuge. So once already you get into the tehum of the city of refuge, so then you're already safe. So when measuring the tehum of the ir miklat, you don't do the straight line thing. Rather, you just measure the mountain for what it is, because both the ir miklat and the egla roof are midoraisa chevra. That is daf nun ches of Masechta Ayruvin. Let us do a little review. So basically, today talked about measuring the tehum. We used a rope that is 50 amas. And then we spent a lot of time talking about what happens when you get to a mountain and a valley. So if you can basically just cover it with your rope, right? Whether it's a valley that you can get to the other side of the rope, or if it's a mountain that you can kind of just hold the thing over your head and cover the mountain. So then gesundheit, just do that, and that would be the best. But if you're unable to do that, so then you basically try to figure out what the equivalent of a straight line would be. We talked about when you're measuring a valley, so when the valley doesn't have 90-degree walls, right, they're kind of like on a slope, so then the Tanakama says that the maximum depth of that valley could be 100 amas deep, whereas Acherim say it could have a maximum of 2,000 amas deep, and Rav Yosef seemed to say that it can even be more than 2,000 amas, and that's because he was talking about where the walls are completely straight.